שלב את רוצה שאני אתחיל את המצגת שלי?
אז אחרי השאלה הראשונה שאני אומרת לה, tell me about yourself, אז אחרי זה אני אשאל.
בסדר. ואני יכולה לקום אם אני מרגישה שאני צריכה לעמוד וזה.
המקום שלנו, הבית שלנו זה הבית שלך.
Boker Tov, good morning, everyone. Good morning. Good morning to those of you who were able to brave the cloudy, gray, rainy, beautiful day we're having in Cleveland today. Thank you so much for coming out to be here in person. And to those of our friends who are on the live stream, we are so happy you are watching. If you have friends who were not able to be with us in person or on the live stream, please know that this will be in our live stream archives. Any of our services, any of our presentations, last week's Roe versus Wade panel, which for those of you who, I know many of you were here or watched it, it was absolutely phenomenal, as will our presentation today also be phenomenal. But if you have friends who want to see it or who you think should see today's presentation, all they have to do is go to our website, go to live stream, find the chapel archives, and they'll be able to watch the entire presentation. So my introductions today are very short. First of all, that's Rabbi Yael Dadoun. Enough about her. Okay. But what I would like to say in the form of an introduction of Rabbi Dadoun, but more of an announcement, for those of you who are not aware, and I think all of you know, but this Friday night, Erev Shabbat, at 6 p.m., in our sanctuary, not in our chapel. So for friends, those of you who cannot join us in person, when you go to the live stream, please go to the sanctuary live stream, not to the chapel. But at 6 p.m., we have an amazing, beautiful, warm, loving, what else? Did I say musical? Highly musical. We have an amazing service that we're going to bring in Shabbat together, but most importantly, have the formal, finally, after 2.5 years, installation of Rabbi Yael Dadoun as Rabbi of the Temple. So we're very excited. Oh, thank you. I have a helper in the audience. For those of you who want to come before 6, and we encourage you to do so from 5 until 6, there's going to be a little something we're calling it a pre-oneg. A pre-neg. That sounds like a vitamin I had to take when I was in the first trimester of all my pregnancy.
Sounds delicious.
A pre-neg, a pre-oneg. That's going to, I think, have some heavy appetizers, noshes, maybe even some wine. So if you want to have a little nosh or sip of wine with us, anytime between 5 and 6, our service will start at 6. We believe it will conclude somewhere between 7:20 and 7:30, and then, of course, we'll have a very festive oneg to follow. So we hope you can join us Friday night. The guest of honor, who we are so excited is here. I'm going to let her actually tell you more about herself, but I will tell you this. As a much, much, much younger cantor in Cleveland, back in the 80s and 90s, there was an Orthodox rabbi here in town. He and his wife, Rabbi Larry Zerler, and his wife Bernie, were here at what used to be known as Warrensville Center Synagogue. Anybody in Cleveland long enough to remember Warrensville? It was located next to the place formerly known as Oakwood Country Club. So if you know where Oakwood was, next door was Warrensville. And Rabbi Larry Zerler, Bernie, was and still is incredibly delightful, brilliant, and just so much fun to be with. Larry equally is brilliant and wonderful. Larry, I want to say something about Rabbi Larry Zerler. Larry was the only Orthodox rabbi in town who welcomed me with open arms to chant alongside of him when he conducted a funeral. That doesn't make the other Orthodox rabbis bad people. It's just there's something called Kol Isha, which I think will come up in today's conversation, that has to do with the sung voice of a woman in the presence of men. So if I was called on to chant a funeral of a family that had known me for years because I'm a Cleveland kid born and raised, Larry was the one who warmly always made me feel very welcome, chanting the appropriate prayers for a funeral next to him without him making me feel bad or making anyone feel bad. He welcomed me and was kind, and I'll never forget that about him. And they have beautiful children, and one of their kids is Yoni Zerler, who made Aliyah, moved to Israel, met and married this unbelievable human. She'll tell you a little bit about their life and their children, but that's my tie-in to this family. And when I recently went to Israel with my husband, my daughter, and her boyfriend, we knew we had to connect with Yoni and Yochi. And we did on Yom HaAtzmaut at a picnic where we met their beautiful children and some other family and friends. And she said to me, we're going to be in Cleveland for a family bar mitzvah at Green Road Synagogue yesterday, Shabbat yesterday. You know, if you ever wanted me to come by and speak to your community. And we're like, so from Israel, I think I called you Rabbi. And the whole thing was signed, sealed, and delivered before I got home to Cleveland. So with that, I'm going to turn the program over to Yochi Rappaport, who is the Executive Director of Women of the Wall. Be prepared to learn a lot, and just remember all the questions that are going to fly into your brain, because afterwards we will have a moment for some Q&A. All right, so Yochi Yoni's not here. Sorry, yeah, just have Yoni on the brain. Yochi and Rabbi Dadun, thank you so much.
Thank you. Cantor, a special thank you to you so much for doing this. Yeah, thank you so much for making this happen. It's so very important. So, Yochi, we got a little bit of an introduction as how you're connected to our temple, but tell us a little bit about who you are.
So I just want to say thank you again to Rabbi Dadun and to Cantor Kathy for bringing me, for hosting me, and for being so kind and nice. I will also thank all of you here for saving me from going to the ball game today. All I did was look for an excuse not to go, especially when it's raining outside. I forgot that outside of Israel, weather tends to be not boiling hot. So my name is Yochi Rappaport. I'm 32 years old. I'm married to Yoni Zerler, and I'm a mother of two beautiful daughters, Golan, who's 5, and Klil, or Lily, if it's hard to pronounce, who is 13 months. I grew up in Tzfat, Safed, up north, one of the mystical cities in Israel, in an Orthodox household. I still consider myself Orthodox, by the way. I grew up in what we call a Tzionut Datit, the national religious community in Israel. My youth group was Bnei Akiva. Now, Tzfat is a very conservative city, small c, very close-minded, very traditional. And growing up, I knew that I love praying, and I love religion. I love everything about it. And yet something in my religious experience is missing. But I didn't know what it is that's missing. Now, you know how sometimes you're cooking, let's say you're cooking a stew, and you're tasting it, and it's tasty, it's getting there, but something is still missing. Well, let me let you in on a little secret. Don't hold it against me. I don't cook. Or I don't cook well, might I say. And when I cook, and I'm looking what to add to what I'm making to make it tasteable, I don't know what to add. So I know salt, and I know cumin. That's it. And that's exactly how I felt growing up. I'm looking for a spice to add into my religious experience, to feel that I'm there, to feel like I'm connected, and I couldn't find it. And then when I was 18, I joined the army. I served as a commander in Nativ, which is a course of Judaism and Zionism for soldiers who aren't Jewish, Orthodox Jewish, or new immigrants. And then finally in the army, I was exposed to the larger variety of the Israeli society. And I met a lot of modern Orthodox, liberal young women who taught me that very simply, Judaism can be wider than what I grew up on. It's not just about, okay, the Orthodox way that I grew up about. It's the Reform way. There's conservative, Reconstructionist, liberal, modern Orthodox. And the first time I went to Kabbalat Shabbat on my base, we were about 100 women and 2 men. Again, it was a very women course. And one of my friends, very simply, stood up, looked towards the 2 men who were there and said, I'm leading Kabbalat Shabbat, okay? She had the most beautiful voice. And right there, I felt that what was missing in my religious experience was very simple. The spice was salt. It was me feeling connected. Me feeling that when I go to temple, when I go to synagogue, I don't just have to sit in the back or on the side and pray silently. That I can be a part, I can be present. That I go to synagogue and there are 9 men there, which is another very hurtful experience that I had. 9 men who were waiting and waiting and waiting. And I'm standing there and I'm saying, I'm here. I know you're waiting for the 10th man to show up, but I'm here. I showed up. Count me in. They looked at me, they laughed, and they started praying. 9 men. What I'm looking for, what I was looking for, and what I want for my 2 daughters is so simple. I want to feel connected. I want to stand here. I want to lead the service. I want to read from the Torah and not just kiss it with my pinky from afar. I want my daughters, I want Jews in Israel and all over the world, young women, to know that we own Judaism too. It belongs to us as well. And that's how I joined Women of the Wall, by simply looking for my way back home. And Women of the Wall showed me the way back home, the path to the Judaism that talks to me, that makes me feel connected to. So that's just a little bit about me.
Thank you for that incredible opening imagery. In our Torah, we learned that at Sinai, we were all there. And that means women too. And we very much count in every part of Sinai. So please tell us more about your involvement with Women of the Wall. How did you join? How did you become so involved? And what has your experience been like so far?
Okay, thank you. So if you don't mind, I'm going to start off with a short video clip. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about the Kotel, the Western Wall, a little bit about Women of the Wall, where we are today, what we achieved already, and what we're trying to achieve currently.
Put on your face, know your place. Shut up and smile, I could do that. 'Cause no one knows me, no one ever will. If I don't say something, take that dry blue pill. They may see a monster, they may run away, but I have to do this. I can't keep quiet. No, no, oh, I can't keep quiet. No, no, no one woman right. Oh, I can't keep quiet. There'll be someone who understands. Must be someone who understands. There'll be someone who understands. I can't keep quiet. I can't keep quiet. I can't keep quiet. No, I won't keep quiet.
Okay. So when talking about Women of the Wall, the main question that we have to ask ourselves is, who owns the Western Wall? And by trying and answer the question, who owns the Western Wall, we're actually going to try and answer a more complicated question, which is, who owns Judaism here in Israel, or back there? Now, before I talk about Women of the Wall, I want to talk for a minute about the Western Wall. And I want to take you back 2,000 years ago, after the Second Temple was destructed, and Jews were scattered throughout the diaspora, and they were sitting on the rivers of Babylon and mourning Zion, mourning Jerusalem. And what kept them together was their hope that one day they will return back home to Zion, and their dream, once again, to be able to pray freely at the Kotel, the Western Wall. Their hope, their desires, their dreams throughout the entire generations is what turned the Western Wall into a holy site. It is not God that turned the Western Wall to a holy site. It is us, the people, men and women, Orthodox, Reform, Conservative, Reconstructionist, secular. We all turned the Western Wall into a holy site. And women today, we still have that same simple dream. Once again, to be able to pray freely according to our tradition with the Torah scroll at the place that we too turned into a holy site. So who are Women of the Wall? Women of the Wall is a group of women from all denominations. One of the most amazing things about our organization is the fact that we were able to break the barriers between us, women. Reform, conservative, secular, Masorti, Reconstructionist, liberal. Men and women, by the way. We have many men who support us. We gather together for the past 33 years, so for over 3 decades. A group of women is gathering once a month on Rosh Chodesh, the beginning of the Hebrew month, at the women's section of the Western Wall. And what do we do there? Very simple. We pray. We pray and we demand that women too will be able to pray freely according to our tradition. What we ask for is very simple, I promise you. We call it the 4 T's. The first T is tefillah. How simple. The ability to pray out loud. Now, when we go to the Kotel on the men's section, it's always very loud, different minyanim, many men are joining together, offering other men to put on tefillin. And at the women's section, it's usually silent. Every woman has her own siddur, her own prayer book, pray silently. But when Women of the Wall come, we come as a large group, 100, 150, 300. We want to pray as a group of women with the talit, the prayer shawl, the tefillin, and the 4th T is our main struggle until today, the Torah. The ability to read out from the Torah scroll when we go to the wall. Now just
Yochi,
think
I want to verify something you're saying, the 4 T's. You were saying tefillah, which is to pray, the Torah, which women are customarily not allowed to read out of, hold in more Orthodox circles. And tefillin, for those of you who are unfamiliar with, is the phylacteries that are on the arm and the top of the head. And a talit is our prayer shawl that we wear customarily for services.
Thank you.
Thank you.
For clarifying. Now just think for a minute about the absurd in our struggle. For over 3 decades, a group of Jewish, religious women are fighting for what? The simple ability for women, Jewish women, to pray with the holy Jewish items at Judaism's holy site, the Western Wall. We have a supporter, her name is Linda. She's over 80 years old. And a few years ago, she told me, Yochi, this is just too much for me. You know, when I was younger, I was one of the people who used to go to the Soviet Union before the 90s and smuggle in Jewish items so they can have a prayer book, so they can have a mezuzah, so they can have something that resembles Judaism. And I can't believe it that today, in Israel, the Jewish and the democratic state of 2022, I still have to fight for my basic right to be a Jewish woman here in Israel. And now we have to ask ourselves, what's the problem, right? Who owns the Western Wall? Who are we up against? Why does a group of women have to fight for these basic rights? Now, to the left, those are the paratroopers who fought the '67 war. They joined our struggle, by the way, about 15 years ago, saying, look, when we fought for the Western Wall, we did it, most of them are secular. We did it knowing that the happiness of the people, the Jewish people all over the world, is not going to be complete until the symbol of the Jewish people, the kotel, is not back in our hands. And we sacrificed a lot. And yet we see how the Western Wall is run today, how it was conquered again, and we say not for this. They joined our struggle, and they call us the modern liberators of the Western Wall. Because if in 1967, a group of men with helmets and guns had to liberate the Western Wall, today, a group of women with prayer shawls and a Torah scroll are liberating the Western Wall once again. And who are we liberating it from? Any guesses? Exactly. You're all right. So when the Kotel was returned to Israel, the Israeli authorities, the chief rabbinate, which is an ultra-Orthodox religious rabbinical institute in Israel, who are supposed to control every religious aspect in Israel, but because of the lack of separation between state and religion, what it really means is that they control every aspect of our lives. And I'll talk about it at the end. They turned to the Israeli government and said, what are you going to do with the Kotel? Now, the Western Wall is a holy site. Please allow us to control, to own the Western Wall. And the government of Israel abandoned the Western Wall and handed over the keys to a small zealot group from our people, the chief rabbinate. From 1967 until today, who owns the Western Wall? They do. And they turned the Western Wall into its own country. It's basically the Israeli Vatican. They appointed, no, it is. They appointed the Pope, the Kotel rabbi, okay? And exactly like the Pope, he's appointed for life. So from 67 until today, we had 2 Kotel rabbis. The current one was appointed in 1995. Does anyone want to guess how old he is? 51. He is 51 years old. And he controls one of the most powerful sites in Israel. He has one of the most political positions. No one wants to touch his position. No one does. And he owns the Western Wall. He has his own police, the ushers that you saw in the video that don't really like women of the wall. And it's his own country. So he has his own laws, his own rules.
Yochi, will you actually take a moment and tell us what we saw in the video? What were the women trying to accomplish at the security checkpoint, and what happened and why they were surrounding Anat Hoffman in that way? Which, by the way, one of those women was my classmates from rabbinical school. Yeah.
So what happened in the video that you saw, besides the violence, was a group of Jews trying to bring in a Torah scroll to the Western Wall. I'll talk about the issue with the Torah scroll shortly. But they were simply trying to bring in a Torah scroll to the wall. What the ushers were trying to do was to prevent women and men also, because Rabbi Rick Jacobs was there, Rabbi Steve Wernick, who was at the time the head of the conservative movement, and many other fellows, supporters. We tried to bring in Torah scrolls to the Western Wall. Very simple.
To do what with it? To destroy it? To harm it?
Of course. To tear it apart, right? What else would we do with a Torah scroll? To read from it. The crime of reading from a Torah scroll is just impossible for the Kotel rabbi. The Kotel ushers that he rents, that he, I don't know what to call it besides that, for Rosh Chodesh, when we come, I'll show you a picture of them in a minute, a photo. Their only purpose, their whole purpose, their only job is to prevent women of the wall, from praying peacefully. Because what happens if we pray peacefully, if no one tries to knock our tefillin off our head, if no one tries to drag our prayer shawl on the floor, if we read from the Torah scroll, what would happen? Nothing. And the nothing is what scares them. They won't normalize the photo of women simply praying with a prayer shawl at a public site, at their kotel. They don't want to normalize that image. Why? It scares them. It scares them to see something different. The same way I'm sure that my teachers were scared that I'll see something different. Because what might happen? What happened to me? I fell in love. I fell in love and I chose a different path. But they don't want that. They want the control of having their kids, their generations, being the same way that they are. They think that Judaism doesn't need to change, but Judaism changes all the time. So the fact is that the Kotel rabbi has a law. When he saw that women, a group of women, Women of the Wall was established in 1988 by Anat Hoffman. Anat Hoffman was by coincidentally at the Kotel. She saw that there's an issue of women praying peacefully, and she established Women of the Wall. When the Kotel rabbi saw that a group of women are coming to the Western Wall every month and are basically challenging the way that women prayed at his Kotel, at his wall up until then, he had to stop them. And the simple way of doing that is by putting out a new regulation. Now you have to understand that it's his country. And according to his country, one may not lead a religious ceremony that contradicts local custom and hurts the feelings of others. And he said, look, everything Women of the Wall are doing is according to the Orthodox law. As a group of women, women are permitted to pray as a group of women. Claps for the Kotel rabbi, right? For the Orthodox authorities. We are permitted to wear a talit, a prayer shawl. We are allowed to pray with the phylacteries if we wish to, and we are allowed to read from the Torah scroll. But, the rabbi said, there is something that's called a custom. And according to his custom, according to his tradition, women cannot pray that way. Because throughout the generations, most women did not pray in that way, okay? The prayer shawl, the phylacteries are what we call time-consuming commandments that most women said, okay, we don't have the time for that. And sages 2,000 years ago always said, okay, you don't have to. Because women were so busy. With what? With children, with the husband, with the household. We didn't have time to go out and receive something else, to go to synagogue. Of course, women weren't counted in synagogue. We didn't have time. Women didn't have the time to go to synagogue.
The text doesn't say women aren't allowed. The text says women are exempt. That is not the same thing.
Exactly. And that's why the Kotel rabbi said, okay, you can. But the custom was that women simply did not pray that way. Now, women didn't also know how to read and write, but time changed, right? And he said, if they do so, and it breaks my heart, we might hurt the feelings of others, right? Isn't that heartbreaking? Because for them, to hear Cantor Kathy with her beautiful voice might hurt your feelings. Because in their text, it says, Kol beisha irva, a woman's voice is sexual. Do you know where they took that that text? A woman's voice is sexual? Exactly, from King Solomon the Wise, who said, let me hear your voice because your voice is melodic and your face is beautiful. And they took the word arev, which means melodic, and turned it into irva, which means sexual. So men can't hear women singing, but who pays the price? Women. So women simply can't sing, so men won't hear them singing. We can't pray with the beautiful Jewish items, the prayer shawl, the tefillin, the Torah, read from the Torah scroll, because if we do so, we might hurt the feelings of others. Now let me tell you, and Cantor Kathy can share from her experience. When we come to the wall as Women of the Wall, my feelings are hurt every time. Have you joined us? Oh, okay. My feelings are hurt many times. To have an older person yell at me, too bad Hitler hasn't finished your family in the Holocaust. To have Jews yell at me, Nazi, when I came there when I was pregnant, and they wish that I die during birth, when they wish that my daughters will die, my feelings are hurt every time. And I'm not talking about the physical violence yet, okay? And yet my feelings are not considered part of the others. I'm not considered part of the public, of the worshipers at the Kotel. Only men or women. but only those who pray according to the rabbi's way. Only they are considered the others. And we are the only ones who can hurt their feelings by simply praying. If you violated this law was in place up until 2013. Okay? If you violated this law, you could sit in jail for 6 months or pay a $3,000 fine. For what? For simply being a Jew. A woman, a Jewish woman, who wants to absorb God, who wants to pray, but in a different way, in a liberal way, in a more pluralistic way. You can end up in jail. You're a criminal for just wanting to pray. And in 2013, after many photos like this, of women being arrested with a Torah scroll, of women being arrested for wearing the prayer shawl, for singing, for saying Shema Yisrael out loud. After so many photos like this, and after a lot of pressure by North American Jews, two very important things happened. And the first thing that happened was that the district court finally ruled that there's no reason to arrest women of the wall. Very simple. The judge, Moshe Sobel, who's Orthodox, said, look, I see photos, I see the videos. It's what I do when I go to the kotel, I pray. I also see a lot of violence. I see men throwing chairs, I see women whistling, I see those young kids who are pushing and kicking. Why don't you arrest them? The people who are really bothering. Don't arrest women of the wall who are simply praying. But more than that, the judge said that the Kotel rabbi always talks about tradition, about the custom, his custom. Well, the beautiful thing about a custom in Judaism is that it changes. It can develop over time, over location. Women of the wall, the judge said, have brought a new tradition to the Western Wall. Now, legally, we won. How amazing is that? When you come to the Kotel on your next visit with Rabbi Dadon, who's going to lead it, I urge you to bring your prayer shawl to the Kotel. No one's going to take it at the entrance. And when I heard all of the birthright groups who came to Israel this summer, who told me that they were at the Kotel for Kabbalat Shabbat, and they were able to simply pray with their classmates from the men's section, and no one shushed them. No one told them that they can't sing out loud. It made me so happy. Because legally, we can do so. Legally, today, we can pray out loud as a group. We can wear the prayer shawl. We can wear the tefillin. What's left? The Torah. Now, technically, we are allowed to read from the Torah scroll at the women's section. What's the problem? The Kotel rabbi. Now, the Kotel rabbi understood that we're winning. And if we're winning, he's losing. And it's not just losing the image of women simply reading from the Torah. It's losing his position. It's losing his power. It's losing the fact that it's normal. It's just normal for women to pray the way they want to pray. Okay? Liberal-minded Jews can just pray at the Kotel. He won't allow that. He had to stop us. And the way to stop us is very simple. A new regulation. His country. And the new regulation says that no one, men or women, can bring in a Torah scroll to the Western Wall. And the rabbi said, look, this is not against women. Men equally can't bring in Torah scrolls to the wall. You don't need to, he said. At the Kotel, at my Kotel, there are over 120 Torah scrolls that anyone can use anytime they want. Well, all of those 100 Torah scrolls are at the men's section, of course. So if we, as a group of women, want to read from the Torah scroll, we need the Kotel rabbi to lend us one. And he said no. Because when he says everyone, he of course only means men. Women are just simply not part of his public. So we offered to donate a Torah scroll to the women's section. Now we come once a month. We come at 7 a.m. We're there until 8:30. That's it. We need 1 hour a month. And the Kotel rabbi said, no, I'm sorry. I cannot accept presents from prostitutes. There's a very famous discussion in the Talmud that asks who can donate a parochet, okay, what covers the ark, to a synagogue. And sages ask, okay, if someone works in the market, can he donate the parochet? Yes. Can this person? Yes. What about prostitutes? The answer is no. They cannot donate a parochet to a synagogue. And for the Kotel rabbi, that's his answer he gave back to us. That prostitutes can't donate a parochet to a synagogue, so of course, why would we donate a Torah scroll to the Kotel? So he won't lend us one. We can't bring one in from outside. What's left? Exactly, to smuggle it in. How crazy is that? Every month when we come to the Kotel, now let me tell you, it's not easy to smuggle a Torah scroll. But more than that, it's also embarrassing. Now, these are the people, okay? This is what we face when we come to the Kotel. I'm sure these are not the security guards that you met when you came to the Kotel. But when women of the wall come, we have a special welcoming. And now look at them. They are 3 times my size, okay? And their whole purpose is to prevent us from bringing in a Torah scroll. Now, what's the issue? A Torah scroll, unlike a bomb or weapon, a knife, doesn't beep when you go through security. They don't care if I walk in with a knife. They care if I walk in with a Torah scroll. So our bags go through manual check. They body search us to see, might the Torah scroll be on our bodies? And they're all they care about is that we won't be able to read from the Torah scroll. Now, we can read from it once it's at the women's section. We just need to get past this heavy security to bring it in. Now, there were a few times when Cantor Kathy joined us, we were able to smuggle it in. I won't tell you how. But I'm going to show you a short video clip that you'll see how crazy it is. There was one time that a man was able to smuggle in the Torah scroll for us, but he brought it to the main plaza. Now, my job is to bring it in to the women's section. So when people ask me, how do you break the patriarchy, I always say with heels and tefillin. Now, I know I don't like baseball, but I do play rugby. So I did practice for a while. But just imagine, this is what we have to do every month we come to the Western Wall. We have to think of different ways. That's the last T that remains. The Torah scroll, the ability to read from the Torah scroll. That's what remains today. Now, in 2013, thanks to a lot of pressure by North American Jews, Prime Minister back then, Netanyahu, understood that he has to do something because this is crazy. The image of women being dragged on the floor with a Torah scroll, it just doesn't look good. So he turned to Natan Sharansky, who was the head of the Jewish Agency, and asked him to find a solution. And the solution is so simple. So here we are. To the left is the men's section, which is, of course, 2/3 of the Western Wall. To the right is the women's section. And the bridge that you see in the right is the bridge, the Mughrabi bridge, that leads to Temple Mount. Now, you might have visited this area. This is Robinson's Arch. Now, this plaza that you see over there, we call it the Sun Deck. But that plaza was built illegally overnight in 2010 by who was back then the Ministry of Diaspora Affairs, and up until a month ago was Prime Minister Naftali Bennett. And Prime Minister Naftali Bennett at the time said, look, this is for the reform movement. You want to pray together? Here you are. You need a place to have bar and bat mitzvahs for your families? Here you go. Well, Supreme Court and Women of the Wall always said, This is an embarrassment. It looks like a third-class plaza. And we are not third-class Jews. What Prime Minister Netanyahu, together with Natan Sharansky, did was to sit us down for 3 years of negotiations. And after 3 years, with the approval of the Kotel rabbi, with the approval of the two ultra-Orthodox parties in the Knesset, we came up with what's called the Kotel Agreement. And the Kotel Agreement is very simple. It says, let's take this Sandek and renovate it. Have a big entrance that people will actually know how to get there, that it would be accessible. Today there are a lot of stairs going down there. Have it actually reach the Western Wall stones. And more than that, who owns, who controls this area? We want to. Not the Kotel rabbi, the way he does today. Women of the Wall, a joint community with Women of the Wall, the Jewish Agency, the Reform and Conservative Movement. That's the Kotel Agreement. The Kotel Agreement was passed in 2016 and canceled in 2017. Why? Because the ultra-Orthodox. The ultra-Orthodox communities understood, you know what? We don't care when they pray in this plaza. Who cares about that plaza? Who's going to visit there? Who knows about that place? But once it's renovated, once people can choose, that's their issue. They don't want people to be able to choose where to go. They want to hold the monopoly over the Kotel the same way they own the monopoly over religion in Israel. So they went out, they demonstrated, they pressured Prime Minister Netanyahu, who canceled the agreement. You might have remembered he came to AIPAC in 2016, promised everyone the Kotel agreement, came back home, spat in everyone's faces, and canceled the Kotel agreement. The situation today is that for the past year, we had a more liberal government. When the government was formed, they promised us that the Kotel agreement is going to be one of the first things they're going to implement. But then they were tipped off by the ultra-Orthodox parties, by the Likud, that if they dare to touch the Kotel, that's their problem. That's when they're going to go out and demonstrate. They will not allow the Kotel agreement to go through. And unfortunately, the government was too afraid to do anything. They need them in the future. They were too afraid to do the right thing. And Robinson's Arch, the egalitarian section, still looks like this. It's still in use. The Reform and Conservative Movement use it all the time for bar and bat mitzvahs. But unfortunately, the Kotel that I wish to show you when you come to Israel does not look the same way that the other plaza looks like. Yes, exactly. So when you come in from the main entrance, as you see the main entrance from Dung Gate, the one that's separated between men and women, so to the right, there's a small entrance, and the reason you have to ask is because there's a small sign that says Ezrat Yisrael to the right, but the entrance is very small. It's not in eye reach of anyone. So it's just a bit before the main checkpoint of the Kotel to the right, and then you have to go down a bunch of stairs.
This is what she was describing earlier. To the left, if you can see the bridge at the upper left-hand corner, the Kotel is on the other side of this wall as it stands now. But in order to get to Robinson's Arch, you have to walk all the way around. And the entrance is very, very small. You have to go down many stairs and then veer to the left. They're kind of scary stairs, honestly. It's not a very safe place to go down, not very accessible. And I just want to emphasize something that Yochi said. On the other side of what they call the sun deck, or this platform here, are huge rocks. So you can't get to the actual Kotel to pray. And while they do have, it's in construction now, which also makes it not prayable at this time. But even the platform that's gone a little bit further, again, still, I mean, it's a construction site. It doesn't feel like a prayer space, and it's certainly not the safest place to pray, just in terms of tripping or falling.
There's a small porch, what Rabbi Dadon was referring to. There's a small porch that has access to the stones. It's called the Women of the Wall porch. Again, Supreme Court said no. But that porch was closed 3 years ago because one of the stones fell down, and then the Kotel rabbi had to chuck them, every single one of them, which he does every week at the other plaza. But unfortunately, even though everything is safe now, the porch wasn't reopened. So even the small, little access that we did have towards that, to the wall is closed for the past 3 years.
Yochi, this is so very painful to listen to, even with all of the things that the women of a wall have managed to accomplish. I want to go back for a second and ask you a personal question. I appreciated the kind of silly ESPN video of you, jetting across the platform at the Kotel. You clearly have amazing skills, but all jokes aside, what does that feel like that you have to do that?
Look, it's a hurtful question because yes, looking at it today, it's funny. But if I fell with the Torah scroll, I would have to fast for 40 days because if a Torah scroll falls on the floor, according to my tradition, people have to fast for 40 days. They don't care about it. According to them, my Torah scroll is not considered a kosher Torah scroll. They don't care what happens to the Torah. They don't care what happens to me. It's shameful that I have to do that. I violated the law twice in my life. The first time was when I married outside the chief rabbinate, and the second time was when I smuggled in a Torah scroll to the Kotel. Now, why? In the end of the day, why are these considered crime? The fact that they hold a monopoly over religion, okay? The fact that in Israel there's only one way to get married. There's no civil marriage. So for them, it's not just losing the Kotel. The Kotel is a symbol. It's a symbol for the public sphere, the Jewish public sphere in Israel. It's a symbol for divorce. It's a symbol for marriage, for conversion, for kosher certificates, for restaurants, for burial. They don't want to lose all of that. But I look at it and I say, but there's more than one way to be Jewish. Judaism doesn't belong to anyone. We're all able to enjoy Judaism, and we have the right to practice Judaism and celebrate it the way that we want. And what hurts me the most is that it's not just about the monopoly over religion. They turned it into discrimination against women in the public sphere. Kol Beisha, that women can't sing in public spaces, it only refers, in the Talmud, sages only refer to it when women say Shema Israel. And yet they turned it, the ultra-Orthodox, turned it into the monster of women can't perform in public events. Did you ever see one of these signs when you were in Israel that ask women to dress in a certain way, that have signs, women to the left, men to the right, that women have to enter a building from around? And then we see billboards where women are simply marked from the public sphere. And it's not by coincidence. It's not just one person. It happens all the time. Women are simply not invited to perform in public events. And especially because I'm a woman and because I have 2 daughters, this cannot happen. I'm fighting not just for the Kotel, I'm fighting for the public sphere in Israel. So I have a country. So we all have a country because Israel is a home away from home. Israel is there for anyone, whether you choose to live there or not, if you want to visit or not. But Israel is there for all of us. And I know that a lot of people, diaspora Jews, feel disconnected from Israel because of these incidents, because it looks so far away from what you're used to. And yet I'm here to ask you not to give up, because Israel is way too important to leave it to us Israelis. You have to be a part of the struggle. You have to be a part of the visibility of Israel, of the fact that Israel should make all of us feel at home. And these photos don't make anyone feel at home.
I want to emphasize something you said a moment ago about the rabbinate. It's not just at the Kotel, but it's also for marriage. So if a couple want to get married outside of the chief rabbinate, they have to often go to different countries, in order to get a legal license and then bring that license back to Israel. My husband and I also got married in Israel, but we had to legally do it in America. And we actually brought our Reform rabbi, who will be here next weekend for installation, to marry us in Israel. So it's not just about the Kotel, but it's about our joys and our difficult moments in Judaism. And so I want to actually talk to you a little bit more about that. Not all of Israel is like this. Not all Israelis feel the same way about religion, women of the wall. Can you tell us a little bit about the Israeli perspectives, because there's many, the Israeli perspectives about women of the wall and the way the chief rabbinate operates in Israel?
So I'll give you a few perspectives that I hear. One of the most beautiful, actually, things that happened to me at the Kotel was last year we came there for Slichot before Yom Kippur. And as I was waiting for my group, there was a large group of young Orthodox girls, 15, 16, and they performed a huge circle at the women's section, and they started praying out loud. And I came up to a few of them after they were done, and I started talking to them, and I said, this is so emotional for me. Just to see you and hear you, and I explained who I am. And a few of them said, oh, okay, thank you, and left. And one of them started attacking me. And she said, yes, but you know.
Is it rebooting? Okay. So we'll just continue in the meantime. Check 1, 2.
And we'll open in just a few minutes for question, but I want Yochi to answer her last question.
All right, and let me just say one thing. Friends on the live stream, there's a... The live stream's gone. Friends in person, it's really gone. No. What can you do? You know, what do we call it? Act of God. We can control the weather. We can't control the weather. We can't control... Okay, so then I guess what we're going to do is just continue.
Yeah, I think we should just let her finish, and then we'll open it up to questions after that.
We'll keep waiting to see the live stream. We'll let you know if the live stream pops back. At the Kotel, you don't need a nice voice like the cafes to lead. You just need a loud voice. That's what I was taught at the Kotel. So that girl started attacking me and saying, when we come to the Kotel, we just pray. When you come with your provocation and your tefillin and your prayer shawl, I just pray. And I said to her, look, honey, for you to just pray, you need our 33 years of provocation.
Amen.
I don't look at our service as provocation, but you know what? To bring social change, we need provocation. We never broke the law. I mean, we did by bringing in a Torah scroll, but we never hurt anyone. We don't act in violent ways the way they do. But yes, I look at my provocation and I said, this is what I was taught in the army, that when I see something with a red flag above it, that's when I say I have to ask questions. And here I'm asking a question, why? And I think that a lot of Israelis are asking the question, why? Why do we need the rabbinate when we get married? Why do we need them when we bury someone and they won't allow the daughter to say Kaddish? Why do we need them? Why aren't there other ways of performing, of being Jewish? But I also see the Israelis who say, well, excuse us, Judaism for so many years was Orthodox. And how dare you come with a reform way? They don't even know what conservative is, okay? If you're different, you're reform. And reform for them equals Satan. They call us heretics. Okay, so and that gives them the green light to attack us, to tear 39 of our prayer books last year. That's the video that I was going to show you, but I'll send it to you, the link. That gives them the green light to attack us. When they see a pregnant woman, to push, they don't care. They don't mind if my daughter dies. They know that they have to stop us. And I also hear a lot of Israelis who say, but it's their kotel. You come into their backyard, to their home, and you dare to act in a different way. But the thing is that it's not their kotel. It's a public site. It's a Jewish public site that belongs to all of us, not just to us Israelis. It belongs to you as well. And you know what?
If you don't want us at the women's section, that's fine. Fight with us to implement the Kotel Agreement. But you can't say we don't want you in Robinson's Arch. We don't want the Kotel Agreement to be implemented. So where do you want us? In the sea? I mean, we're going to be here, okay? We're neighbors. It's going to happen. So the Kotel Agreement is a compromise. There's no big drama. If people want to pray separately, that's where they have the separated plaza. But for Jews like us, for parents who want a bat mitzvah for their daughter, a bar mitzvah with the grandmother standing there side by side and not on a plastic chair, gazing over the mechitza to maybe hear her grandson. No. Robinson's Arch, the Kotel Agreement, is one who's going to allow everyone to choose. I think that choice is a beautiful word. They think that choice is a terrifying word.
As Reformed Jews, we always talk about informed choice.
Exactly.
And this is no different. And as a matter of fact, when we talk about orthodoxy, always having capital over Jewish parts of our tradition, it's also important to note that orthodoxy did not always look the same. So when in the 1850s, 1860s, when Reform Judaism blossomed as something new, it wasn't exactly new. It was a response to what was going on in society and in the world. And the way orthodoxy looks today, in its many branches, was also a response. So it's not like we can trace Reform, Orthodoxy, Conservative, or any of these streams or denominations to Moses, right? Or even our 1st to 3rd century rabbinic work. Judaism, we call ourselves Reform, not Reformed. We're not done. Reforma. We're always reforming. But all denominations of Judaism are always reforming and choosing and making decisions based on how the world is constantly changing, finding loopholes, finding ways to make the religious experience work in our world today. And I think that that's really important to note, especially when we're making these really important decisions. I know Cantor Sibo was recently in Israel and also had a very challenging and kind of painful experience at the Kotel. And the first few times I went to the Kotel, I had a very romantic, ideological attachment. And then when I started learning a little bit more, I went to the Kotel for the first time with the Women of the Wall in 2010. It was alarming and terrifying. And my talit was ripped, and from some guy who yanked it. And we were trained to link arms with other people when we were walking in, as if to create a blockade, which at the time, I was in my early 20s, I didn't understand why we would have to do something like that. And then I understood when I walked in. It's very powerful, but also very painful and very sad that this is the way we have to express our Judaism. And you and I didn't grow up in the same stream at all, and it's so there has to be room for everybody.
Yes. And there is.
And there is. And
sometimes, we have to, we always prefer that it comes voluntarily, right? But sometimes we have to force the way, and unfortunately with the government, and again, because of the lack of separation between state and religion, what we're trying to do is work through the law and change the fact that, you know what? Reform rabbis deserve a government salary the same way that the Orthodox rabbis deserve. And that when you want marriage, it can be civil marriage as well. When you want a divorce, you don't have to go through the chief rabbinate, who, by the way, who gives Jewish divorce? Men do. So if the man refuses a divorce, the woman is considered married. She's captured. We want other ways.
I want to say one thing. Yochi and Rabbi Dadoon, myself, we would want to go on a trip to Israel with any of you, any day, any time, any year. We love Israel.
Amen.
And we have a lot of problems in our country, and yet we're here. And we encourage people to come and visit us. Israel has a lot of problems in their country. For me, it's one of the most glorious, miraculous, amazing places on the planet. But there's a big problem there with this. There are some other problems too. But the reason I say this is I don't want anybody who's not visited Israel or who hasn't been in a long time to walk away from today's talk and be discouraged in the possibility of visiting Israel. So am I saying
Yeah,
that?
thank you,
You know what I'm
Cantor.
saying?
That is such an important
It's
point.
amazing.
Yes.
This is a huge
Thank
problem,
you.
and thank God for somebody like Yochi and Anat and the brave women who fight every day, not just once a month at the wall, but fight every day for this, you know, not just for women of the wall, but for all rights of women and all people in Israel. And thank God for that. But don't be discouraged. Let's find out and be encouraged how to make it better. And I see one of the ways is Rabbi
So that's what I was going to say. Right before we open it up to questions, can you tell us how we can support Women of the
course.
Wall first and
So
foremost?
Rabbi Dadon is wearing one of Women of the Wall's beautiful prayer shawls.
This is Cantor Sebos.
We have a few
Shalom.
versions. Now, unfortunately, I usually.
Oh, yay.
Wait, hold on a second. James, is sound coming through the live stream now? Okay. Okay. Oh, you just walked
Thank
through
you,
the live stream,
James.
friends.
Thank you for all of those on live stream. I'm happy you joined us back. We had a power issue here. So thank you for the question. So power struggle.
The question is, how do we support women in the wall?
So the first way, as Rabbi Dadon is doing, she's wearing her WOW support. We have beautiful prayer shawls you can see on our website. I'll send you the link afterwards. I usually carry them with me, but I only came with a carry-on because of the issues in the airport. You can wear your Women of the Wall support. When you come to Israel, and as Cantor Siebel said, please do come. Again, I chose to live there. My husband made Aliyah. We choose to live there. And yes, there are issues, the same way that every country has their own issues. We're working on them. We'll get through it. So come to Israel, but when you come on Rosh Chodesh. Make sure that your trip is around Rosh Chodesh so you can come and join Women of the Wall with our service. We always have many groups, communities, gap years from Israel and abroad who join us. Now, anyway you support your local federation. Make sure that the money you give to Israel goes to the places, the organizations that you support, that talk in your language, that talk about liberal Judaism, that talk about pluralism, that your federation can put pressure on the Jewish agency. You need to talk to your federation and said, hey, I heard about Women of the Wall. What are you doing to implement the Kotel Agreement to make us feel at home at the Kotel?
And Yochi, what is the most powerful federation in North America?
Cleveland.
Is it? Yes, it is. It actually is. Per capita, Cleveland is known as the most powerful federation and gives the most money, the most financial support. Well, I'll let you push back in a minute because nobody on the live stream will hear you if you push back right now. So hold on the pushback. So besides the pushback, which we're going to get to Fran in 1 minute, let me get a couple questions. You're good? Okay, let me just start over here. You know what? We're going to just start here and go down the line.
I don't have a question. I just want to make two comments. The first one is, Israel is for everyone.
Exactly.
It's for everyone.
I agree.
And the first time I went, I put my foot on the ground from the plane and I cried. It's for everyone.
Thank you for that.
So I follow Anat Hoffman online. And it seems clear to me that there, within the legal system, the different branches of Judaism and the Women of the Wall have, been supported. And yet, how does the religion play into it when the legal system says yes? That's the part I don't quite understand. Is it like Israel is only for Orthodox Jews? And that's not even how it started.
It's a great, what's your name? I'm sorry?
What is your name?
Linda.
Linda, that's a great question. And the answer is politics. So we have two ultra-Orthodox parties at the Knesset. And those two parties are very convenient. They're a very convenient partner. They'll sit with a left-wing government, a right-wing government. They don't care. Why? Because they need what they want, which is usually money for their communities, rules that talk about their communities. They need free daycare. They need money for the men who study Torah and don't go to the army. They need that the law will say that their men don't have to go to the army. As long as the government gives them that, they'll be their partner. But if not, that's an issue. And most governments who are formed want them on their side. So it doesn't matter, again, if it's a secular left-wing government or a religious right-wing government, they need the ultra-Orthodox parties. So the answer is politics, because even when Supreme Court is on our side, even when Supreme Court rules and says that the law says that if you mark off a woman from a billboard, you can sit in jail because that's a crime. Okay, it's discrimination. And yet nothing really happens with it. The police doesn't enforce it. They claim that they don't have enough manpower to enforce those criminals. It's just a matter of politics, unfortunately. So even when Supreme Court gets involved oftentimes, and then it will get canceled oftentimes by the government. They just won't implement it.
I also want to add that in our country, where there is a separation supposedly between church and state, we were here last week for Roe v. Wade, and we heard how our country has taken into consideration only the Christian view of terminating a pregnancy, when does life begin, and answering it only for our Christian brothers and sisters, not for Jewish people. And I also want to remind everybody that while I think we can all agree that abortion is challenging everywhere in the world, in Israel, right after this law was passed with Roe v. Wade, or overturned with Roe v. Wade, Israel actually made it a little bit easier for women to terminate a pregnancy if they needed to, and have the access fast-tracked a little bit more easily. So it's interesting how you would think it would be not that way, but, you know, and even in our country that there is a separation, it's debatable.
But I also just, one moment, I want to answer Linda by saying, when Ben-Gurion was secular, was establishing Israel, he turned to the Chazon Ish, okay, a very famous ultra-Orthodox rabbi, and he said, I want you, back then, the ultra-Orthodox community was 1% of 500, exactly. They were 500 out of nothing back then. And he said, what does it take for you to join us, okay? Because we want everyone to be part of this upcoming state. And the Chazon Ish said, look, I want to ask you a question. When you see two horses, both of them carrying a wagon, one is full, one is empty, who needs to move to the side to allow the other one to get through? And Ben-Gurion says, of course, the empty cart should move aside to allow the full cart to come through. It's just basic. And the Chazon Ish said, well, exactly. We, the religious people, we are the full cart. You, secular, you are the empty cart. You need to move aside for us. And from then on until today, the empty cart, the secular, the modern Orthodox, we all have to bow, to move aside for the full cart, the ultra-Orthodox, to come through, to be able to practice their Judaism. So you're right, but it's Ben-Gurion's mistake. And when he died, he said, before he died, he said, I was wrong for giving them everything. We're not empty. We're not an empty cart. It's different.
Okay, Kathy? Well, you know what? I'll come right back to you, Marlene.
I just have a question about, so in the United States, you know, we have the 14th Amendment, which guarantees equal treatment by the government. And I'm assuming there is no such protection in Israel. I don't know. And then I also was wondering if you know what percentage of the population the ultra-Orthodox is. These are unrelated things I've been thinking about the whole time. And then the last thing was I do a lot of lecturing about the Holocaust, and I was thinking about how American Judaism's pressure on Nazi Germany kept the April 1st, 1933 boycott to one day when it was supposed to be for months on end. And so I wonder, isn't there something more that American Jews, men and women, can do besides just happening to show up in Israel on a Rosh Chodesh and being at the wall for one day? I'm sure you must have contemplated some sort of one day where American Jews are invited to come, or, you know, is it you know, and I know we're going to get back to the federation issue, but, you know, it's very hard to move an organization like a federation to put pressure on Israel on the behalf of 50 women sitting in a room, or 50 people, sorry, Greg, sitting in a room. And so I'm just wondering, isn't there a more direct way for American Jewish women and other supporters of equality in Israel to back you up? I mean, you know, if we were able to change what Nazi Germany was doing, surely we can, you know, have some impact on what Orthodox Jews in Israel are doing.
So thank you. Aside from the federation, it's just pressuring the government of Israel. Now, pressuring the government is just, they need to hear it from all spectrum, from everyone. They need to hear it constantly. It needs to be dripping that, okay, the Kotel Agreement, they need to hear it from Jews in Cleveland, they need to hear it from Jews in DC, from New York, from LA. They need to hear it all the time that this issue is pressing. Netanyahu never cared about women of the wall. He cared about North American pressure. He wanted to put it to bed thanks to you, not thanks to me. So just pressuring anyone you can. Do you know someone in AIPAC? Talk to someone in AIPAC that would talk to the government of Israel that would do something about it. Someone in the Jewish agency, someone in your federation. When you come to Israel and you visit and maybe you have a talk from a politician, ask him, what are you doing to implement the Kotel Agreement? This is an important issue. You're visiting the president of Israel. We had a lot of groups over the summer who came and told us, we met with the president, we met with this politician, and we asked him, embarrass them, make them feel like you're not comfortable in Israel, like you want this to be finally implemented. Again, it's not a huge drama to implement the Kotel Agreement. Now, if you ask me, let them demonstrate. Okay, so they'll demonstrate for a few days, for a few weeks. But in the end of the day, we'll all feel comfortable in Israel. Oh, but the rest of your questions, you asked about the amendment. So Israel has what we call a chukah, which is kind of like the amendment that you have here in America, but it was never sealed. It was never really closed. So it changes all the time. Now, Israel did, in the Declaration of Independence, did promise equal rights for men and women equally. But there are a lot of asterisks, again, religion and other feelings, etc. So it just doesn't come under consideration. And what was your last question? I'm sorry? So I'll ask you, ultra-Orthodox, what do you think their percentage is? 12. Okay, 12, yes. 12% of the population. Now, they do, they grow very fast, which honestly, I mean, thank God they grow, okay? But it does scare me as a person living in Israel. I mean, what will happen when they're 50%, 40%? Now, it's not just that they're 12%. It's 12%, but 100% of them vote. Meaning the regular voting rate goes by 69, 100% of them vote. So as they're 12% of the populations, there are two ultra-Orthodox parties have 13 seats at the moment out of 120. So it's a lot of political power. It's a lot of pressure. Yes.
Mine is more of a common question, which is speaking to the idea of 12% of the population is Orthodox. My understanding of the system of government in Israel is that the prime minister needs to form a coalition, and Netanyahu, for his almost, I don't know how long he held the prime minister position, but he needed the ultra-religious to form his coalition, so that my understanding of it is that it gave them power out of proportion to their numbers. And
right.
My thinking, my question is that if the Netanyahu is not the prime minister and they have somebody with a different point of view who does not use the ultra-Orthodox, to form their coalition, that some of that power would be eroded.
Yes, you're right. And in this past year, we had a government, again, that was very convenient, leaning towards liberal-minded Jews, and yet they were too afraid of doing anything. Again, it was also a very complicated government, and they needed everyone's permission all the time, and yet they were also too afraid to implement the Kotel Agreement. So now we have Yair Lapid, who is our prime minister for the next, I don't know how long, a month, 2 months. If we won't have, we're going to elections in November, but if we don't come to a conclusion, maybe another 3 months, who knows? He can't do much right now. But also, they were always leaving the door open for the next coalition, for the next government that's going to form. Are we going to need them or not? Everyone's always afraid. To form a coalition, you need 61 seats. They need them as part of the coalition. When the Kotel Agreement was passed, it was with the government, with no ultra-Orthodox. But Netanyahu made the mistake once of going against the ultra-Orthodox, and he said, never again. I'll never again do anything that would hurt them because it hurts my political base. So he only cares about his political base. That's it.
I feel as if Israel, who we know sometimes we can say is located in a rough neighborhood, sometimes surrounded by not every person who loves them. I think the Israeli politicians and the government sometimes is more, they're frightened. They're not so frightened about the neighbors who surround them. They know what they're dealing with and they know how to protect the country. But they're frightened about their fellow Jew, right? I mean, that's the bottom line. They're more worried about the ultra-Orthodox than Hamas, Hezbollah, and other.
Right, we know how to deal with them.
All right, so here's the situation. We know there's more questions. However, I would like to take 10 more, but no, we can't take all the questions right now because of the live stream. But if you have a few minutes, and if you want to be later to the baseball game, let's have fun.
I will say, Yochi, you've given us so much to think
Right.
about.
And in
That
the
is
lobby,
so
yes, we can meet
so
only in the
meaningful.
lobby here.
And thank you so much. I think your work is the work that you're letting us come into and hopefully be a part of in the future is so important. And thank you so much. And we will hopefully take maybe a couple more questions in the lobby if you're okay with it.
Just tell everyone how they can purchase a Woman of the Wall Talit.
So you go on our website, womenofthewall.org.il, and then there's a shop on the top. You'll see our beautiful prayer shawls and our challah covers, our prayer books. We do live stream our events on Rosh Chodesh. I know it's very late here, but we live stream it, so and we always have people from all over the world who watch us, so you're welcome to be on the other side of the screen. And again, I'm here, and I'm happy to answer any questions you have.